What if the greatest secret of Freemasonry was never hidden in a locked temple, buried beneath a forgotten city, or sealed inside a forbidden manuscript? What if it was placed directly in front of you, on buildings, on rings, on old documents, on monuments, inside symbols so familiar that most people stopped questioning them long ago? The square, the compass, the letter G, the twin pillars, the unfinished temple, the death and resurrection of the Master Mason. You have seen these symbols before, but you were not taught how to read them. And that may have been the point, because Freemasonry was never only about brotherhood, architecture, charity, or moral discipline. Those are the outer layers, the acceptable explanation, the version that can be spoken in public. But beneath that surface is something much older, a symbolic system built to preserve an ancient idea that reality is not merely something you live inside. Reality is something consciousness participates in building. And if that is true, then the old Masonic symbols are not decorations. They are instructions. Instructions for shaping the self. Instructions for directing the mind. Instructions for understanding how the unseen becomes visible. And perhaps most disturbing of all, instructions for becoming difficult to control. So why were these teachings hidden behind ritual? Why did initiates speak through symbols instead of plain words? Why does the letter G sit at the center of the square and compass? Why do the two pillars appear again and again in Masonic temples? Why does the candidate have to symbolically die before becoming a Master Mason? And what was the lost word really pointing toward? In this video, we are going to open those doors one by one. We will begin with the most misunderstood symbol in Freemasonry, the letter G. You have probably heard the official explanations. Some say it means God. Others say it means geometry. But the deeper esoteric interpretation points to something more powerful. The generative principle, the hidden force through which thought, form, and reality begin to take shape. Then we will go back before the modern lodge, before medieval stone guilds, before the public image of Freemasonry existed at all. We will trace the current backward into Egypt, into the mystery schools, into Hermetic philosophy, and into the ancient belief that the universe is not a dead machine, but a living mind. From there, we will examine the two pillars, Boaz and Jachin. Most people are told they represent the Temple of Solomon, and they do, but only at the first level. At the deeper level, they represent the two forces behind all creation: expansion and contraction, active and receptive, electric and magnetic, the visible and the invisible moving in balance. Then we will look at the square and compass, not as a logo, not as a fraternity emblem, but as a map of human nature. The square represents the material world, fixed, measured, heavy, bound by consequence. The compass represents the higher mind, the power to imagine, direct, design, and call form out of the unseen. And between them stands you, the builder, the one who must learn which part of the self is holding the tool. After that, we will enter the royal arch, the hidden vault, the missing word, the secret beneath the ruins. But here's the twist. The lost word was never only a word. It was a principle buried beneath allegory, that the inner world does not merely react to the outer world. In many esoteric traditions, the inner world comes first. Thought becomes pattern. Pattern becomes action. Action becomes structure. Structure becomes destiny. And finally, we will reach the darkest and most powerful Masonic ritual, the symbolic death of the Master Mason. The story of Hiram Abiff. The strike, the fall, the silence, the raising. On the surface, it is a lesson about loyalty and integrity. But beneath the surface, it is an initiation into something far older. The death of the false self. The death of the reactive identity. The death of the small mind that lives only in fear, survival, and obedience. Because in nearly every ancient mystery tradition, the initiate must die before he can truly see, not physically, but inwardly. And this is where the real secret begins. The Freemasons did not invent this knowledge. They inherited it. They compressed it into symbols. They placed it inside rituals. They carved it into architecture. They protected it through centuries of religious persecution, political upheaval, and cultural collapse. But symbols have one weakness. They can hide knowledge for centuries, until someone learns how to read them again. So tonight, we are not looking at Freemasonry as rumor. We are not looking at it as fear. And we are not here to repeat the shallow stories that have already been told 1,000 times. We are going deeper into the symbols, into the rituals, into the geometry, into the ancient idea that the human being is not merely a creature trapped inside reality, but a conscious builder standing between heaven and earth. And once you understand what the square, the compass, the pillars, the lost word, and the death ritual were really pointing toward, you may never look at those symbols the same way again. Let us begin with the letter at the center of it all. The letter G. The public explanation is simple, but the public explanation is only the first door. In most Masonic descriptions, the letter G is said to stand for God. In others, it stands for geometry, and both meanings are important. God represents the divine order behind existence. Geometry represents the mathematical language through which that order becomes visible. But the question almost nobody asks is this: why would one symbol need both meanings? Why would the same letter point to divinity and measurement at the same time? Because in the older esoteric worldview, these were never separate things. Geometry was not just mathematics. It was sacred measurement. It was the study of how invisible principles become visible forms. It was the bridge between the mind of the divine and the structure of the world. To the ancient builder, a line was not just a line. A circle was not just a circle. A triangle was not just a shape. Each one was a living principle, a frozen movement, a silent law made visible. And this is where the letter G begins to open. At the surface level, it may mean God. At the intellectual level, it may mean geometry. But at the initiatory level, it points toward generation, the generative principle, the force by which something comes out of nothing, the hidden movement by which thought becomes form, the mystery through which the invisible becomes visible. Every building begins as an image in the mind. Every temple begins as a proportion. Every society begins as an idea. Every destiny begins as an inner pattern repeated long enough to become external reality. This is the secret hidden in plain sight. The Freemason is not only a builder of stone, he is a builder of consciousness. The lodge is not only a room, It is a symbolic universe. The tools are not only tools, they are mirrors of inner faculties. The square teaches limitation. The compass teaches possibility. The plumb line teaches alignment. The level teaches equality. The rough ashlar and perfect ashlar teach transformation. And the letter G, placed at the center, reminds the initiate that all building begins from a generative source. But where did this idea come from? To understand that, we have to go back before the public history of Freemasonry, before the London lodges, before medieval guilds, before cathedral builders shaped stone beneath the authority of kings and bishops. We have to go back to the ancient mystery schools. In Egypt, the temple was not merely a place of worship. It was a machine of initiation. Its walls were covered in symbols, not because the ancient priests loved decoration, but because they understood something modern culture has forgotten. A symbol can hold many layers of meaning at once. A child sees an image. A student sees a story. An initiate sees a law. The Egyptian mystery schools of Memphis, Thebes, and Heliopolis were not schools in the modern sense. They were systems of transformation. A candidate was not simply taught information. He was slowly changed, tested through silence, purified through discipline, confronted with darkness, led through symbolic death, and gradually introduced to the hidden architecture of existence. At the center of that architecture was one claim: the universe is not dead. It is alive with mind, alive with rhythm, alive with correspondence, alive with hidden order. This is the essence of the Hermetic current. As above, so below. As within, so without. As the universe, so the soul. As the soul, so the world. This was not poetry to the ancients. It was a map. The human being was seen as a small cosmos, a microcosm reflecting the macrocosm. The body, the mind, the emotions, the will, and the spirit were not separate accidents. They were layers of one living structure, and the work of initiation was to align those layers. This idea moved through time like an underground river. It flowed through Egyptian priesthoods, through Pythagorean schools, through Platonic and Neoplatonic philosophy, through Hermetic manuscripts, through alchemical texts, through the symbolism of cathedral builders, through the legends of the Temple of Solomon, and finally, into the ritual architecture of Freemasonry. This is why Masonic symbolism feels older than the organization itself, because it is. Freemasonry became one of the vessels that carried fragments of a much older symbolic language, a language of building, a language of proportion, a language of death and rebirth, a language that says the outer temple is only a reflection of the inner temple. And that brings us to one of the most important images in the entire Masonic tradition, the two pillars, Boaz and Jachin. If you have ever looked at the entrance of a Masonic lodge or studied the imagery connected to Solomon's temple, you have likely seen them. Two columns standing at the threshold, one on the left, one on the right, silent, massive, guarding the entrance to the sacred space. The public explanation tells us that these pillars come from the biblical Temple of Solomon, and that is true. But in esoteric symbolism, the temple is never only a building. It is the cosmos. It is the body. It is the psyche. It is the field in which consciousness learns to know itself. The pillars stand at the threshold because every true initiation begins with polarity, light and dark, active and passive, expansion and contraction, mercy and severity, sun and moon, fire and water, electric and magnetic, heaven and earth. You cannot enter the deeper temple until you understand that reality is built through tension. Most people spend their lives choosing one pillar and rejecting the other. They chase expansion and fear contraction. They chase light and deny shadow. They chase control and avoid surrender. They chase action and forget receptivity. But the initiate learns something different. The pillars are not enemies. They are partners. Boaz represents strength, density, containment, the power that gives form. Jachin represents establishment, motion, extension, the power that allows something to stand and unfold. Different traditions interpret their qualities in different ways, but the deeper lesson remains the same. Creation requires two forces, a force that pushes outward and a force that gives shape, a force that dreams and a force that contains, a force that expands and a force that contracts. Without expansion, nothing begins. Without contraction, nothing becomes real. A thought must expand into possibility, then contract into form. A breath must be inhaled, then exhaled. A seed must break open, then root downward. A star must ignite, then stabilize. A human life must dream, then discipline itself into reality. This is why the pillars matter. They are not just architectural references. They are a teaching about the mechanics of manifestation. And between them is the path that most people never see. The middle pillar. It is often implied rather than shown. It is the invisible axis. The center line, the place where consciousness stands between opposing forces and learns to direct them. This is the real position of the initiate, not lost in one extreme, not trapped in reaction, not possessed by chaos, not frozen by control, but standing in the center, aware of both forces, able to work with both. This is where Freemasonry becomes more than symbolism. It becomes psychology. It becomes spiritual technology. Because every human being lives between pillars. You live between fear and desire, between memory and imagination, between instinct and reason, between the body and the spirit, between what has already happened and what has not yet been built. And your life is shaped by which force you unconsciously obey. The initiate learns to stop obeying unconsciously. He learns to stand in the center, to observe, to measure, to choose, to build. This is why the temple entrance is guarded by two pillars. Because before you can enter the sacred space, you must learn how to pass between opposites without being ruled by either one. But the pillars are only the threshold. Once inside the temple, the initiate is given tools. And the two most famous tools in Freemasonry are the square and the compass. Most people see them and think they already understand. A square, a compass, the tools of builders, the emblem of an old fraternity. But again, the surface meaning is only the first door. The square is the tool of the material world. It measures angles. It tests what is straight. It brings form into discipline. It says, this is the boundary. This is the law. This is the consequence. This is the structure that cannot be ignored. The square is matter. The square is the body. The square is action. The square is what happens after the idea enters time. It is the world you can measure, but the compass is different. The compass does not simply measure what already exists. It draws from a center. It creates a circle. It defines a field. It marks the relationship between the point and the boundary. The compass is the higher mind, the power to imagine before acting, the power to conceive before building, the power to hold a center while drawing a world around it. The square teaches you how to live in reality. The compass teaches you how reality begins. Together, they form a complete doctrine of human nature. You are square and compass. You are matter and mind. You are limitation and imagination. You are body and consciousness. You are the stone and the builder. Most people live entirely inside the square. They react to circumstances. They wait for permission. They adapt to what already exists. They measure themselves by external results. They believe the world outside them is the only world that matters. But the initiate learns to pick up the compass first. Before the stone is cut, the pattern must be drawn. Before the temple is built, the design must be held. Before action becomes powerful, intention must become clear. This is not fantasy. This is the oldest sequence of creation. First, the unseen. Then, the seen. First, the image. Then, the structure. First, the inner alignment. Then, the outer construction. This is why the square and compass are so powerful as a symbol. They are not saying, escape the material world. They are saying, learn the order of operations. Do not build from fear. Do not build from confusion. Do not build from imitation. Do not build from the noise of the crowd. Return to the center. Draw the circle. Define the field. Then bring the square into action. The compass without the square becomes fantasy. The square without the compass becomes slavery. But when they are united, imagination becomes structure. This is the great work. Not simply becoming successful, not simply becoming moral, not simply becoming knowledgeable. The great work is the transformation of the rough stone into the perfected stone, the shaping of the human being from unconscious material into conscious architecture. And this is why Masonic tradition speaks so often of the temple. The temple is not only Solomon's temple. It is not only a lost building in sacred history. The temple is you. Your mind is a chamber. Your body is a foundation. Your habits are stones. Your words are carvings. Your attention is the light allowed inside. And your will is the builder that either works with the plan or abandons the site. Every day you are building something, even if you do not know it. Every repeated thought lays a stone. Every emotion strengthens a wall. Every choice opens or closes a door. Every fear left unexamined becomes a hidden chamber. Every act of courage raises another pillar. This is the part modern people miss. You are not waiting to become a builder. You are already building. The only question is whether you are building consciously. And that question leads us to the Royal Arch, one of the most mysterious and symbolically charged degrees associated with the Masonic tradition. The Royal Arch tells a story of loss and recovery, a ruined temple, a hidden vault, a descent beneath the surface, a secret preserved in darkness, and the discovery of something that had been forgotten. At the public level, it is a dramatic ritual about the recovery of the lost word, a sacred name, a missing key, a piece of divine knowledge buried beneath the ruins. But as always, the deeper meaning is not found by taking the symbol literally. It is found by asking what the symbol is doing inside the soul. A lost word is not only a word. A word is vibration. A word is identity. A word is creative force. In nearly every ancient tradition, creation begins with sound, command, breath, or name. In the beginning was the Word. The world is spoken into being. The divine name is too sacred to pronounce. The mantra changes consciousness. The spell shapes perception. The prayer reorganizes the heart. To lose the word is to lose contact with creative power. To recover the word is to remember the principle by which creation occurs. This is why the Royal Arch is so important. It is not merely about discovering something hidden under a temple. It is about discovering what was buried beneath the ruins of yourself. Because every human being has a lost word, a forgotten center, a buried name, a hidden principle, a part of the self that still remembers how to create from alignment rather than reaction. But life covers it. Conditioning covers it. Fear covers it. Shame covers it. Obedience covers it. The world tells you what to believe, what to want, what to chase, what to fear, and what to call real. And slowly, the inner word is buried. You begin to live from the outside inward. You react to the square without ever touching the compass. You mistake the noise of the world for your own voice. You forget that consciousness is not only something that observes reality, it participates in reality. This is the principle hidden inside the lost word. The inner world matters first, not because the outer world is fake, not because physical reality has no laws, not because desire alone can bend the universe, but because the quality of consciousness you bring to reality changes what you notice, what you choose, what you repeat, what you attract, what you build, and what you become. The inner state becomes the pattern. The pattern becomes the action. The action becomes the structure. The structure becomes the life. This is not the shallow version of manifestation. This is not pretending. This is not sitting still and waiting for the universe to obey you. This is disciplined inner architecture, a thought held clearly, an emotion purified, a will directed, an action repeated, a life constructed from the inside outward. This is why such teachings were hidden in allegory, not because ordinary people were too stupid to understand them, but because knowledge without inner discipline can become dangerous. Power without purification becomes manipulation. Vision without humility becomes obsession. Will without wisdom becomes domination. So the teachings were placed behind symbols, behind rituals, behind tests, behind silence, because the initiate was not only being given information, he was being prepared to carry it, and preparation always requires death. This brings us to the Master Mason degree and to the legend of Hiram Abiff. In Masonic tradition, Hiram is the master builder of Solomon's temple, a figure of skill, integrity, knowledge, and sacred craftsmanship. He holds a secret that others desire before they are worthy to receive it. 3 conspirators demand the word. He refuses. He is struck. He falls. He dies. And later, he is raised. At the surface level, the story teaches loyalty, fidelity, courage, and moral strength. But beneath that surface, the ritual is far more ancient. It is the drama of symbolic death and rebirth. The candidate is not simply hearing about Hiram. The candidate becomes Hiram. He enters the pattern. He undergoes the fall. He is brought into darkness, and he is raised again. This is not random theater. It is initiation, because in the ancient mysteries, no one reached higher knowledge by simply being told secrets. The old self had to break. The identity built from fear had to die. The false personality had to be exposed. The reactive mind had to lose its throne. The part of the person that clings to safety, approval, status, and control had to be symbolically buried. Only then could something deeper rise. This is the meaning of dying before you die. You find it everywhere once you know how to look. In Egypt, the soul passes through the underworld. In the Eleusinian mysteries, the initiate descends into the darkness before returning transformed. In alchemy, the blackening comes before purification. In Christianity, death precedes resurrection. In Sufism, the self must dissolve before union. In Buddhism, the illusion of the separate ego must be seen through. Different languages, same architecture. The old self cannot enter the temple. It must be left at the threshold. This is why Hiram is struck down by 3 attackers. They are not only men in a story. They are forces within the human being. Ignorance, fear, desire without wisdom, ambition without patience, the demand to possess power without undergoing transformation. They want the word, but they have not become worthy of the word. And this is the warning hidden inside the legend. Sacred knowledge cannot be stolen. It can only be embodied. You can memorize symbols and remain unchanged. You can repeat rituals and remain unconscious. You can know the language of mystery and still live as a prisoner of the square. You can stand inside a temple and never become one. The raising of Hiram is therefore not only resurrection, it is restoration of the inner builder, the part of you that can continue the work after the false self has fallen. This is what makes the ritual so powerful. It teaches that true mastery is not achieved by adding more to the ego. It is achieved by surviving the loss of the ego's control. And this is where Freemasonry, at its deepest symbolic level, becomes a mirror for the entire human journey. You begin as rough stone, unshaped, reactive, full of inherited patterns, carrying the marks of family, culture, fear, pride, and pain. Then life begins to chisel. Failure chisels. Loss chisels. Love chisels. Discipline chisels. Silence chisels. Humiliation chisels. Devya. Responsibility chisels. The search for meaning chisels. Most people resist the chisel. They think discomfort means something has gone wrong. But the initiate learns that the stone is not being destroyed. It is being revealed. What is false is removed. What is hidden is uncovered. What is excessive is cut away. What is essential remains. This is the secret of the ashlar. The rough ashlar is the unrefined human being. The perfect ashlar is not someone without pain. It is someone who has allowed pain to become proportion. Someone who has allowed discipline to become beauty. Someone who has allowed suffering to become wisdom instead of bitterness. This is why the builder metaphor is so enduring, because a human being is not finished at birth. A human being is constructed, not from nothing, but from attention, from choices, from repeated inner alignments, from the courage to face what is unformed and bring it into order. And this brings us back to the question we began with. Why hide all of this in symbols? Why not simply say it? Because symbols survive where words are destroyed. A doctrine can be banned. A book can be burned. A teacher can be silenced. A temple can be ruined. But a symbol can remain on a wall for centuries, waiting. It can pass through empires. It can appear harmless to the uninitiated. It can be dismissed as decoration. It can be worn by people who do not fully understand it. It can be copied, misunderstood, mocked, feared, commercialized, and still retain its original power for the one who learns how to read. This is the genius of symbolic transmission. The square and compass do not force themselves upon you. They wait. The pillars do not explain themselves. They stand. The letter G does not argue. It shines at the center. The lost word does not shout. It is buried. The death ritual does not describe transformation. It makes the candidate pass through it. This is why esoteric traditions have always used symbols, not to hide knowledge from humanity forever, but to protect knowledge until the human being is ready to approach it properly. And now we have reached the most important part of this entire teaching. What does any of this mean for you? Because it is easy to turn Freemasonry into something outside yourself. An organization, a history, a mystery, a conspiracy, a set of symbols belonging to other people. But the deeper teaching only becomes real when you turn it inward. Where are the two pillars in your life? Where are you trapped in one extreme? Where are you expanding without structure? Where are you contracting without vision? Where are you trying to build from fear instead of alignment? Where is the square ruling you? Where have you accepted the material world as the only reality? Where have you allowed circumstances to define the limits of your imagination? And where is the compass waiting? What center have you forgotten? What circle have you not dared to draw? What temple have you been secretly building without admitting it to yourself? What is your lost word? What part of your inner authority was buried beneath disappointment, obedience, shame, or survival? What truth did you know before the world trained you to doubt it? And what false self must die before that truth can rise again? These are not easy questions. They are not meant to be. Real initiation is not comfort. It is confrontation. It shows you the hidden structure of your life. It reveals the tools you have been using unconsciously. It asks whether you are ready to become responsible for what you are building. Because the most dangerous person in any age is not the one who believes every rumor. It is not the one who fears every secret society. It is not the one who collects symbols without understanding them. The most dangerous person is the one who has become conscious. Conscious of attention, conscious of thought, conscious of emotion, conscious of speech, conscious of action, conscious of the invisible pattern behind the visible light. That person becomes difficult to manipulate, not because they know every secret, but because they have stopped abandoning their own center. This is the real threat of the ancient teachings. A person who knows how to stand between the pillars cannot be easily pushed into extremes. A person who understands the square and compass cannot be easily trapped in reaction. A person who has recovered the lost word cannot be easily convinced that their inner life is meaningless. A person who has symbolically died cannot be controlled by the same old fears. This is why the old traditions spoke carefully. This is why symbols matter. This is why initiation was slow. Because the aim was never merely to know. The aim was to become the builder, to become the temple, to become the point at the center of the circle, to become the one who can enter the darkness without forgetting the light. And perhaps this is why Freemasonry continues to fascinate the world. Not because everyone understands it, but because everyone senses there is something inside it, something ancient, something unfinished, something encoded, something that points beyond the surface. The modern world looks at symbols and asks, what do they mean? But the initiate asks a different question. What are they trying to awaken in me? That is the question that changes everything. Because once you ask it, the world itself becomes symbolic. A doorway is no longer just a doorway. It is a threshold. A staircase is no longer just a staircase. It is ascent. A pillar is no longer just a pillar. It is polarity. A circle is no longer just a shape. It is wholeness. A death is no longer only an ending. It is the possibility of transformation. A temple is no longer only a building. It is the architecture of the soul. And the compass is no longer something held by someone else. It is the faculty within you that can return to the center and draw a new world from there. This is the final key. The Freemasons did not hide the secret because it was impossible to understand. They hid it because it must be lived to be understood. The letter G cannot awaken you unless you recognize the generative force within yourself. The pillars cannot teach you unless you notice the polarities shaping your life. The square and compass cannot guide you unless you learn when to measure and when to imagine. The lost word cannot be recovered unless you descend beneath the ruins of your own conditioning. The death ritual cannot transform you unless something false is finally allowed to fall. This is why symbols are silent. They do not give themselves away cheaply. They wait for the one who is ready to look twice. And now you have looked. You have seen that the square and compass are not merely tools. You have seen that the pillars are not merely architecture. You have seen that the lost word is not merely a phrase. You have seen that the death of Hiram is not merely a legend. You have seen that the temple was never only outside you. So the question is no longer whether Freemasonry contains secrets. The question is what you will do with the part of the secret that has now reached you. Will you keep living only in the square, only reacting, only measuring, only adapting to the visible world? Or will you pick up the compass? Will you return to the center? Will you draw the circle? Will you begin the work? Because the world does not need more people who collect mysteries. It needs people who become worthy of them. The old builders understood something we have almost forgotten. A temple is not built in one day. A soul is not refined in one moment. A life is not transformed by one idea. Stone by stone. Choice by choice. Thought by thought. Breath by breath. The work continues. And maybe that is the true secret of Freemasonry. Not that a hidden group controls the world from behind closed doors, but that the human being, when properly awakened, can no longer be controlled in the same way, because he has discovered the tools. He has found the pillars. He has entered the vault. He has faced the symbolic death. And he has remembered that the temple was always being built within. The compass is in your hands. The square is before you. The pillars are waiting. The word is buried, but not lost forever. And the temple is unfinished. If this reached something in you, if one of these symbols suddenly feels different than it did before, write it in the comments. Tell me which symbol opened first for you. The G, the pillars, the square and compass, the lost word, or the death of Hiram. Because the ones who can hear this are often the ones who were already standing at the threshold. They only needed to be reminded where the door was. The truth is, this kind of knowledge was never meant to be sold. It was meant to be shared. If you want to support the research and the continuation of this work, you do not need to offer wealth. You only need to offer your alignment. Subscribe to the channel. It costs you nothing, but it builds the foundation for everything we will uncover next. Keep the compass in your hands. The great work continues.